Utility eCooking project webinar. It's 5 minutes past the hour, so I think we're going to make a start, and as more people come in, they can join in too. I'm sure we're expecting a few more, but I'm going to start by giving a short introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Patrick Tutembe, who is Principal Economist at ERA, the Electricity Regulatory Authority in Uganda, and very much an eCooking champion. So we'll have some remarks from Patrick. I'll then introduce Sarah Najuma, who is the project lead at Umeme for this project. And then we'll hear from Elliot Avila of A2EI, who is going to provide us with a really insightful presentation of data findings from this project. We'll then have some remarks from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, Justine Akumu and Engineer Herbert Abigaba. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions, because this is a rerun of a session that we conducted at the Renewable Energy Conference 2024 in Kampala just a few weeks ago. And that was a really exciting session, and there were a lot of questions, and not everyone got to ask their questions. So hopefully I'm going to make time for that today. So just before I hand over to Patrick, this is a really exciting project. It's been one of the highlights of my work at MECS so far. The project has seen 1,500 electric pressure cookers distributed in and around Kampala, and 500 being monitored by smart meters from A2EI. The aim of the project is to really support the eCooking sector, galvanize the eCooking sector in Uganda, increasing awareness and demand for eCooking, collecting crucial usage data on how people use eCooking appliances. So thanks very much to everyone involved on the project. Thanks very much to the MECS team, obviously, to GEAPP, to Umeme, including, of course, Peter Mwesiga, who has been influential in conceiving and carrying out this project. Also to CREEC, of course, A2EI, Solageo, and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development for their support. So if Patrick is with us, I'm going to invite you, Patrick, to give us some opening remarks, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. It's a good afternoon in Uganda, and a good morning UK and the rest of the world. Once again, Patrick Tutembe is my name. Once again, Patrick Tutembe is my name from the Electricity Regulatory Authority. It's my pleasure being part of this. Could we maybe have other people muted? Okay, yeah, thank you so much. It's my pleasure being part of this engagement. And the pilot, especially the monitoring aspect, the M&E aspect of the pilot, is really very instrumental, because for those who may know that from the time Electricity Regulatory Authority introduced the cooking tariff, the major ingredient was information. And at that time, there was a research that had been undertaken by MECS, which was comparing the cost of preparing meals using different sources of energy, including charcoal, paraffin, electricity, and LPG. And at that time, our desire was that the Electricity Regulatory Authority intended to put in place a subsidized tariff for cooking that would cover all the costs of energy for households. However, one, the information that was available could not support a mechanism that would be foolproof. So at that time, the introduction of the threshold of 80 units and also limiting the number of units that qualify for the subsidized tariff of 412 was limited to 70 because it would not be possible to give every household consumer the number of units that they would need, because there are some who would need more and those who would need less. So one, for us, this M&E of the pilot is really very important as it explores the possibilities of having metered equipment for purposes of pricing and being able to reach every consumer based on their actual consumption of electricity. It is our desire that beyond this pilot, that we can have opportunities of metering or electric cooking equipment, especially for purposes of ensuring that the electricity tariff subsidies can be extended to every domestic customer who is able to transit from using biomass to electricity. So we look so much forward to the completion of this pilot, but also to see how this pilot would be disseminated to sensitize the rest of the Ugandan population on the benefits of eCooking, but also to inform a technological transformation in terms of equipment metering for the purpose that I've already talked about. So it's our pleasure to be in this meeting, and we are grateful for the far that we have come in eCooking, and we look forward to even better opportunities and better endeavors in the coming year 2025. I want to thank the partners, MECS, Umeme, A2EI, and the Ministry of Energy, and the rest of the partners, including CREEC. Forgive me if I forget one critical partner, one critical stakeholder, but all the partners have been very instrumental. And we think that as we go out of this pilot, especially under the leadership of the Ministry of Energy, that we can see how to use the lessons learned for us to be able to roll out electric cooking to the rest of the Ugandan population for the benefits that most of the people on this meeting already know, and as we are going to probably see more in the presentation of the dissemination of the results. I want to thank everyone, and my pleasure being in this meeting. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Great to hear from you, and we really appreciate your support on this project. It's been invaluable. So after that introduction from Patrick, which we greatly appreciate, I'd like to now hand over to Sarah Najuma. Sarah, are you with us? And we're going to have a presentation from Sarah.
Hi everyone, here I am. Yes, I've joined the meeting. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you for waiting. I have a feeling you waited a bit. I appreciate that. My name is Sarah Najuma. I work for Umeme Limited as the brand marketing manager and also the project lead on eCooking. Thank you, and I'm happy to be here. I'll take you through a quick review of the project. I hope you can hear me. I'm here to take you through a quick review of the project. In January 2023, as you may all be aware, we partnered with the University of Louisville to implement an eCooking project in Uganda. And we targeted customers, Umeme customers and staff, but the customers are from 3 districts. That's Mukono, Kampala, and Wakiso, because they have, I think they were targeted because they are big numbers, and most of these customers are elite, so they use electricity and gas a lot to prepare their meals. We are supported by Modern Energy Cooking Services, that's MECS, and funded through the UK aid. I think the major thing here is to take you through the lessons learned from the 1,500 EPCs that were received and sold off last year. Next slide, please. Yes, we received the 1,500 and they were all sold here within a period of 12 months. The target audience were those 80% Umeme staff and 20% customers because the numbers were limited. And at the project launch, the expected outcomes were awareness of the availability of these modern cooking services, and evaluation of the impact of electric cooking on household energy consumption, and recommendations to improve electric cooking adoption and financial sustainability. Next slide, please. In the first days of our project, we were able to demonstrate in over 40 physical places. Yeah, that's Umeme service centers countrywide. And it was part of awareness creation. We showcased at the Umeme annual general meeting as well, where people asked for these EPCs. People wanted to buy there and then because of the benefits that had been shared. Next slide, please. We were also able to train over 30 ECFLIA technicians to make it easy for customers in the event that their ECFLIAs had got challenges. These were both ladies and gentlemen. It's a mixture, we're gender sensitive, so we trained both ladies and gentlemen as technicians, and yet they have done a good job where customers have got issues with their ECFLIAs. Next slide, please. Those are our partners. I'm sure you all know them. We have the ministry, we have CREEC, we have UNREA, we have UK8, MECS, and Umeme staff circle. Because most of our staff members have bought these ECFLIAs through the circle. Given that, they are able to purchase and pay in small amounts until they are done. Like I said earlier, we procured the 1,500, all were distributed. We had 48 staff identified, trained as champions and change agents in the different service centers where our target audiences are. We made a reorder of 2,750. I am happy to announce to you that these 2,750 are here, and we can't wait to have them sold off. People have been demanding, customers are asking, so we will go to the market Monday next week here. The news in this is that initially our project had 6 liters and 10 liters, but through the dipstick survey we did internally, we realized that people preferred an 8 liter as well. So in the new batch, we have an 8 liter ECFLIA, which we're going to launch on Monday as well. So we are going to the market now with a 10 liter, a 6 liter, and an 8 liter. The live cooking demonstrations were done. The electrician, the technicians were trained, and so they are ready to help. They handle project repairs and any other issue that might come. Robust M&E framework established with the support from A2EI. So I said that the current update, the latest update is that we have ECFLIAs in stock, and we are going to the market starting Monday next week. The pilot has made a pilot, so we are still in the same areas of Mukono, Kampala, and Wakiso. And also, the staff, Umeme staff, remain our target. I think we will roll out later after we are done with the 2,750. Next slide. That's a process on how one acquires an ECFLIA. I may not be able to take you through it now, but we have created awareness in the target areas. Your customers at all our service centers, we've distributed literature, we've done posters, we've done YouTube videos directing customers on how to acquire an ECFLIA. It's important to note that for better management of their funds, customers are only able to purchase through their meter numbers. So that's a process that has been communicated widely amongst the target audience, including Umeme staff. If you visited any of our service centers in the areas of Mukono, Kampala, and Wakiso, you'll be able to access that information, but it's also online as well. We've communicated it a lot via digital channels, for example, WhatsApp, through WhatsApp groups. Remember, because it's a project, we haven't done mass marketing. We've only marketed through below the line. So this is more of targeted communication. We communicate to the people we want to reach out to purchase our ECFLIAs. Next slide, please. Some of the key learnings were, it's important to introduce higher purchases. I don't know how we're going to do this, but some customers are not able to pay off those one-off payments of 200,000, 250K, 280K. So it's very important that we introduce a higher purchase so that so many customers can access this. Because remember, we want to improve the lives of all, not just a few can afford to buy this. It was also mentioned that government needs to review its policies around taxes, because for these to reach the mass audience, the cost has to be a bit lower. So we believe that if the taxes are reduced or they're even waived off, it will be easier. Because, for example, there are delayed things coming, like these EPCs came in sometime back, early November. Because I had gone through the tax processes, we are only going to the market next week. So for cost purposes and quick sale to ensure that the product is on the market on time, that could be considered. Technicians are very important because they handle the mechanical issues. So as we roll out in future, we need to have more technicians trained to handle the issues. We also need to involve the local community leaders in engaging customers. If you want people to buy into your product, if you want people to buy into such a movement of joining green energy cooking, you need to involve those people. But for now, it may not be very important given that we are targeting a few. And once we go into mass market, that will be very important to engage people at such influencers in communities. Then project collaborations and partnerships have provided implementation capital and expertise in kind, improving project feasibility. So working alone as Umeme wouldn't have handled this, but because you have area support, you have MECS support, you have the ministry support, everything becomes easier. So it's very important to work as a team. And it's also been observed that selling these EPCs through a utility like Umeme or any other that may come along, it's important because it's more organized and you're able to track the sales and also the funds. Next slide, please. With a project objective of awareness creation, that we did, and it's very important. It may be costly, but it's very important to do these live demonstrations. For example, in Uganda, one of the major delicacies is matoke, putting banana leaves. So every time we tell people, you can cook your matoke, you can cook your boiled chicken or meat in this, they don't believe it until we demonstrate to them. So those ones come off as a cost venture, but they're important as we roll out into the bigger countrywide marketing. There's also need to simplify the appliance acquisition, that one I've mentioned, because for life balancing need for accountability for both utilities and appliance suppliers also, okay, we need to make it quicker for them to access these ECFLIAs. Like I mentioned earlier, customers trust the utilities due diligence, so it's important to work with the utility even when you open up the market away from the project environment. Embedding the utilities' existing processes such as quality assurance and procurement remains critical because at least someone has taken responsibility to ensure that the kind of product they're bringing in is really up to standard for the customer to use. So that one remains critical instead of using any other person in the market to sell or to do the due diligence. So it's better that you involve a utility. Also, the utility can combine the training of repair technicians with awareness of the other utility processes. Now, this is to us, Umeme and any other utility that may take on this project. When we send out these custom technicians to support customers with ECFLIA issues, it's important that we equip them with any other safety trainings, because they then become the ambassador for the utility to communicate more around safety and any other policies. For mass market, we'll have definitely to go above the line. We'll have to do free TV and radio communications, because at some point, because when you're targeting bigger numbers, you can't succeed only by doing VTL communications. So at some point, it will be important that an above the line campaign happens. And I've also already seen it. Initially, we had very few, at 1,500, but now that we have the numbers almost doubled, internally, we've actually tweaked our communication strategy, and they're introducing new ways of communicating to these customers because we want them to go into Christmas with their EPCs. So it's important that when you're going into if you get more numbers, more EPCs in the market, it's important that we create awareness faster than when you use a BTL campaign. Next slide. Yeah. As I speak to you now, I'm in the way forward. The 750 are here. I have a new one, which is 8 liters. So all my communication is going to list out the different types of the different sizes and the different prices, the target audience. So they are here. What we call the way forward in that slide is now. It's happening now. We've continued to engage stakeholders. I have a planned engagement with the area staff, for example, to take them through a demonstration of how to use these EPCs and how to acquire one. We continue to market, like I said, but we'll continue with the target audience until later. We'll continue to operate in a project environment. When our time is done as Umeme in March 2025, we will hand over a report. I understand that this EPC budget is supposed to be a revolving fund. When our time comes when our concession ends as a company, we'll hand over a report with all the details to the next distributor. Thank you very much. That brings it to the end of my presentation.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That was really insightful and great to have your input. And thanks for all your hard work on this. So I can see that some questions are starting to come in on the chat. I think we're going to proceed to Elliot's presentation. Sarah, feel free to start replying to questions on the chat, but I'll be sure to loop back to to questions that are coming in on the chat. So yeah, please, over to Elliot Avila of A2EI. Thanks very much, Elliot.
Sorry, thanks, Will. Can everyone hear me and see me as well and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Then let's get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Elliot Avila. I'm the Research Director at Access to Energy Institute. I'm going to be giving you a presentation today about the findings that we've had from this project. So to jump right into it, you're going to be seeing that I'm sharing this actually from a web browser. So this isn't from a PowerPoint presentation. This is from our online data platform. And all of the data that you're seeing here is coming from that platform. It's where we've aggregated the data, we've analyzed the data, and it's live in many ways. So we're actually using this platform to track the results from this project. And what it's enabling us to do is to present these results to you today, rather than waiting for the very end. We can already be seeing what's happening on this project. So the platform is set up that we have a lot of different dashboards where we're able to set up structures and analyze data, ways to import and export the data. And I'm going to be sharing with you just a couple of those dashboards. So to start with a bit about myself and Access to Energy Institute. So Access to Energy Institute, or A2EI, we're a nonprofit that works in the clean energy space. We work on technology and research development. And our role in this project, as I said, was to support and lead the monitoring and evaluation. And we worked very closely with CREEC and our team here on the ground in order to do that. Our work, so all the stuff you're seeing from my side today, it's made possible by the support from GEAPP, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. So GEAPP's support enabled us to not only be involved in this project and work on the data collection and implementation of the M&D, but also to develop this platform and the analytical tools that are on this platform. So with this support, we've been able to set up things like a dashboard where you can track the CO2 emission reductions from any smart metered project. And you're going to see what we're able to do with this kind of data in this open source platform. The data that we're talking about today comes from 3 different sources. The first data set comes from these appliance energy meters. So these are energy meters that we installed onto people's EPCs that they bought from Umeme. We also have survey data within the platform. Today, we are only sharing the baseline survey data for the most part. And we also have the Yaka system data. So if you're in Uganda, you're familiar with this, but what this is it's the billing data from the households who are participating in the study. So how much electricity they're buying, how much they're spending on that electricity purchases. And we'll cover 2 different sort of topics. One is who are these households? And the second one is what was the actual electricity consumption like? How did people use these appliances? So who are the customers?
Sorry, just a couple of people have just asked if you can enlarge your screen, if that's possible. Thank you.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
All right. So the study population, the households that we worked with on this, they came from the Kampala metropolitan area, so we were restricted to that area. And what that meant was these were primarily urban households, middle class for the most part. We had a lot of Umeme staff within the project, but we also had a number of non-staff households. So these are members from the general public, and we did that to ensure that we can extrapolate our findings, not just to talk about how do Umeme staff use this, but also how does the general public perceive these appliances. At the beginning of the project, so right before or right when people were getting their electric pressure cookers, we conducted a baseline survey. This was a survey to understand how are households cooking before they get this appliance. And so we asked questions to households around who does the cooking within your household, how much time is being spent, what fuels are being used. We found from that baseline survey that an average household within this study who was buying an EPC was spending over 120 hours each month on cooking. And 93% of this time was being spent by women. So this is a huge percentage of the labor on cooking is being done by women. We saw in nearly 40% of the households, men weren't involved in the cooking labor at all. So when we talk about what are the possible time benefits of cooking with an EPC, because it is time saving, we're looking at, as we come to the end of this project, to measure, how does that change the contribution of labor being done by both women and men? Is it reducing the amount of time spent in the kitchen? Is it also bringing more men in to contribute to the cooking? Now we asked households about what cooking fuels are being used. How much are you spending on those fuels? We found the average household within the study reported using 140,000 shillings, Ugandan shillings per day. That's a little less than $40 US if you're international on this call. We found most of that was being used for charcoal, followed by gas. So those were the 2 primary cooking fuels. We also did see electricity was being used for cooking within a lot of the households. And where that comes into play is we saw 86% of the households within the study had an electric kettle. A significant number also had electric cooking appliances such as microwaves, rice cookers, electric ovens, even EPCs here. But when we look across all the households, where is the time really being spent? We see it's primarily cooking with charcoal, followed by cooking with gas. So those are the primary fuels. And when we look at wood, it doesn't contribute as much. And we think this is because this is an urban setting and most people aren't using firewood for that reason. We asked households about what were the top 3 things that motivated you to buy this appliance, and what were the 3 things that made you not want to buy this appliance or that you were worried about. So this graph shows in green, these are households people that said, that's something I've been thinking about that made me want to buy it. And the pink is someone who said, that made me not want to buy it. And it was an open-ended one, and we classified the responses. We see the things that people responded most positively to on their perceptions of why they wanted this appliance. One was the time savings. So a lot of people said, this is going to save me time. Number 2, the electricity consumption. So it's energy efficient. That's why I want this appliance. People also talked about cleanliness. They also talked about the cost of cooking. They also talked about the labor. So I'm going to spend less I'm going to spend less money on cooking. I'm going to spend less labor on cooking. On the things that people perceived that they didn't like about the appliances, one was the reliability, and this really comes down to the reliability of the electricity. So there were concerns that what if I start cooking and the electricity goes out? What do I do then? A second one that came up, there's only one pot within this appliance. So maybe I want to cook more, but I can only cook one thing at a time. We also heard about the ease of understanding. So people weren't sure that they were going to be able to figure out how to use the EPC, and the safety. So people had concerns over how safe it was. And the reason why it's important that we look at these things in green here, these are the things that we want to promote and that we think the market should be talking about. Distributors should be using as selling points for these appliances. In pink, these are the things that as a sector, we need to look at how do we support households more. So the topic of safety, we know that electric pressure cookers are actually really safe, much safer than charcoal or even gas, but people need to be trained on how to use them properly. And we see that there are concerns about that as well, that people don't know how to use this appliance because it's unfamiliar. A big part of our research here was to look at the tariff structure and understand how people were thinking and understanding the tariff. So we know if you're based in Uganda, you might be familiar with the cooking tariff, but the Electricity Regulatory Authority introduced a cooking tariff a few years back, and that cooking tariff essentially subsidizes the price of electricity. It provides half-price electricity for units purchased each month within the range of 80 to 150 units. So if you buy 100 units one month, you're getting 20 of them at this reduced half price. And we asked people, have you heard about this cooking tariff here in Uganda? And we found amongst the general public participating in this, over 70% of them said that they had never heard of it before. The ones that did say that they had heard of it, we then quizzed them. We asked them, when does it start? When does it end? What price is it? Can you explain that to us? And we classified their answers here. So we see overall, there's pretty low awareness of this tariff program there that's intended to incentivize and promote electric cooking. But there is still a significant part of the population that actually understands this. And so we could say 1 in 6 people could potentially explain this tariff to their friend and tell their friend how to access it and how to benefit from it. After we asked them that question, we then asked them, do you think it's affordable to cook with electricity? And do you think it's affordable compared to charcoal on the cooking tariff and on the domestic tariff? In green here, we have households that had previously said that they were aware of the cooking tariff, so they had heard of it before. Those households tended to strongly agree that electric cooking was more affordable than charcoal on the cooking tariff, and overall agree or strongly agree on the regular domestic tariff as well. Meanwhile, when we look at the households that had never heard of that cooking tariff before, we see that their most common response is that they're not sure whether it's cheaper to cook with electricity or charcoal. And that's true on both the normal domestic and on the cooking tariff. So what that suggests to us, our hypothesis here, is that this cooking tariff is a potentially really powerful tool for changing people's minds about cooking with electricity and creating the perception or the understanding that it's affordable to cook with electricity. So people who have heard of it, they tend to agree it's cheaper to cook with electricity than charcoal. But if you've never heard of it before, you tend to not be sure. Now I want to share more about what we're finding from the smart meters. So as I mentioned, we had smart meters attached to all of the appliances for participants who were in our study. I'm sharing a snapshot of the data here from July until October. So this is a 3-month time period. During those 3 months, we had 424 appliances that were being actively used in the smart meter actively used. And across those households during these months, we tracked 9.6 megawatt hours of energy used on the EPCs. We tracked 29,000 cooking events. This is 29,000 times that someone was actively using their electric pressure cooker to cook something, and over 19,000 hours where someone was using this appliance. So across each household, that was 25 units across the 3 months, 76 events across the 3 months, and 50 hours across the 3 months. So my take on this is we're really seeing that households are using this. This is nearly once a day, 6 times a week that someone is cooking with their electric pressure cooker. So the appliances really are being used, and households are increasing their electricity consumption as a result of having this. The smart meters tracked when the energy was used, so we're able to look at that and see across the course of the week from Monday to Sunday, there's really not much variation in which day people are using this. So people use it on the weekends as much as they do on the weekdays. We have our energy profile here. So this is the time of day that people are using these appliances. We see most often they're used midday, followed by a peak in the evening. And there's some usage here in the morning as well. When I talked about the cooking events earlier, so again, this is a time when someone turns on their EPC and they start using it for cooking. And they might be cooking multiple dishes there, but it's a period of time where someone has been using their appliance. And so we call that a cooking event. And we tracked, again, 29,000 cooking events across this 3-month period. We found that the average time someone was using their EPC, they used it for 39 minutes. They used 327 watt hours, so a little less than a third of a unit. And on the domestic tariff, this would cost them 260 Ugandan shillings or 135 Ugandan shillings on the cooking tariff. This is less than 10 cents, less than 10 cents US there. It's about 8 cents and about 4 cents on the cooking tariff. Now, even if we go rather extreme and we say 97%, 97th percentile, this is all the way up here in our graph. If someone was cooking for 2 hours, they still used less than 1 unit. It would cost them only 750 shillings on the domestic tariff and 380 shillings on the cooking tariff. And what does this tell us? When we talk about these results with people who are cooking in Kampala, cook with charcoal, cook with gas, they'll tell you that you can't buy charcoal for this price. You can't cook anything for charcoal that you would, if you were spending this money on charcoal, you can't cook anything. So the average time someone's using their EPC, it is affordable. Even in pretty extreme cases, it's still, very affordable. And that's true on the domestic tariff as well as the cooking tariff. So even if someone's not on that cooking tariff program, we can still say cooking with electricity is affordable. Now, how much electricity were households using overall? We looked at this, and using the billing data, we found after the introduction of the electric pressure cooker, households tended to use on average just under 80 units per month. And these households were getting benefit from the lifeline tariff, from the cooking tariff, and from the domestic tariff. The energy that they were using on their EPC contributed roughly 11% from what they were using before. So it looks like that adds about 11% increase to their electricity consumption and brings them right up to a monthly consumption level just below the cooking tariff start. But you might be wondering, if the cooking tariff starts at 80 units per month, how is it that people are actually benefiting from this program, even though they're using less? And so we have an example here of this, of a household that buys 150 units in 1 month and uses that across 3 months. So on average, they're using 50 units per month. But on that 1 month, that first month that they bought it, they got 70 units on the discounted cooking tariff. They use those across the 3 months. And so nearly half of the units that they buy are discounted, even though they're using below the cooking tariff threshold. And that's because that cooking tariff is based on how much you buy, not necessarily how much you use within the given month. So people are getting this, even though their average consumption is lower. But the question is, are people in this study really benefiting from this program or not? And we found that nearly 50% of the households within the study were not receiving any cooking units, despite them having this electric cooking appliance. And so this graph here, what this is showing, each one of these bars represents a household, and the height of the bar is how many units someone is getting. So in green, these are lifeline units. In orange, these are the domestic tariff units. And in yellow, these are the cooking units. So we see households that are consuming not that much here. They're getting the lifeline, they're getting the domestic units, and that's roughly 50% of the households in the study weren't getting any cooking units. As the consumption increases, households are benefiting more from this cooking tariff. So even though on average we saw before, on average households should be getting 17 units per month, actually a lot of households are getting 0 and some of them are getting 70 up here. I want to quickly share this. This is a something new that's being worked on. This came out of a MECS report that was released recently. So all of this that's being done, all the energy consumption, we're able to actually estimate the savings that are happening within the households, both in terms of money, but also in terms of time. So we're finding from this that households cooking with the EPC are saving 18,000 shillings per month on their cooking costs, and they're saving 11 hours per month on the time that they're spending. So more to come on this, but this is a really exciting way that we can track the impact. Back to talking about the tariff here. So looking at this, we see some households are getting a lot of the cooking units, some are getting none. And the question is, the households that are receiving more subsidies under the cooking tariff, do they cook with their EPC more? And we found that there wasn't any correlation between these two variables. So on this x-axis here, this is how many cooking units a household gets per month. So on the left side, these are households that aren't getting any cooking units. They're just getting domestic or lifeline. On the right side, these are households that get the 70 units every month. On the y-axis, this is how much they use their EPC. So on the bottom, it's people that don't use it at all. And on the top, it's people that use it a lot. And what we see is there's no relationship between these variables. You can be over here and not receive any cooking units and be using your EPC a lot each month. Meanwhile, you can be receiving the full 70 cooking units and not be using your EPC at all. So the relationship between these two variables is extremely low. We said whether you get the cooking tariff or not isn't actually changing how you're using the appliance. And we think that there's 3 main reasons for that, and we hinted at them earlier. The first is it's already affordable to cook with electricity. So we saw before that this cost of cooking, even on the domestic tariff, it's already very affordable. So there's not necessarily a price motivation to switch. Another reason we saw from the previous graph here that a lot of people don't know that this cooking tariff exists. They don't know if they're necessarily benefiting from it or not. So if they don't know that it's there, they're not necessarily responding to it. And then the third reason why we think this might be happening is because of this feature that there's only one pot. So even if you knew it was really affordable to cook with electricity, even if you knew you were getting the cooking tariff and it was saving you a lot of money, you can only cook one thing at a time. So if you have to get dinner on the table and you have a lot of things to cook, you might use your EPC as much as you can, but you still might need to use some other fuels. So looking at all of this, we're wondering, how is it that we can expand the benefits of this cooking tariff? And we have a couple proposals that we put together. Our first proposal here would be to actually shift the cooking tariff. Right now, it's at this upper range, starting from 80 to 150 units per month, but instead to put it right after the lifeline tariff. And we think this would expand the benefits, so more households would get this. We think it would increase public awareness of this program and get people talking about cooking with electricity. And our reason for that is everyone knows the lifeline tariff. If there's another tariff that's right after that, people will be talking about the cooking tariff as well. And we think it can even reduce costs. So the very preliminary basic modeling that we did here with households in this study, if the cooking tariff was here, we found it would actually be reducing the monthly cost to implement this tariff structure. So instead of 3.16 million shillings for the households in the study, it would be only 2.37. And the reason for that is, we can show it on this graph here. The yellow line represents the number of units that are being discounted under the current cooking tariff. And we see most people get no discount, some people get a lot. What we're essentially proposing is to flatten that curve, that everyone gets a little bit. So instead of one household getting 70, get 4 or 5 households getting 15. And this could reduce the overall cost. And as well, I mean, everyone's getting something, everyone's talking about it, and everyone's changing their mind around electric cooking. So that's our first proposal, and we think with more data, we could do a more thorough analysis of this and really expand this and look at what would be the effects nationwide. Now, our second proposal here would be to create a program around providing free electricity units to people who are buying these kinds of appliances. And this is something that we did within our study. When we started the study, the idea of providing people energy meters, doing a long survey with people, no one wanted to sign up for the study until they found out that if you signed up for it, you would get a free 20,000 shilling electricity token sent to you as a thank you. And that drew a lot of people in. People got really excited by that. When they received their token for registering, they would brag to their friends, and their friends would call us and say, we also want to be in this study now. So we tracked from this project that the average household is using less than 10 units per month on their EPC. So a way to subsidize that would just simply to say, we know on average this is what households are using. So what if your first 6 months, for example, you got 10 units free sent to you each month? Or what if when you buy the appliance, you get a 50 unit token? And we think this is easy for people to understand. It still reduces the cost of cooking with electricity. And it also creates that hype and awareness that would lead to more people cooking with electricity. And then the last one here is just to talk about subsidies on the upfront cost. We saw that the price of cooking with electricity is really affordable. It doesn't seem to be a barrier as much as that initial cost of the appliance. And this Umeme project, the appliances were able to be sold at cost. They also had some tax exemptions built into them. So they were really affordable. And Sarah talked about below the line marketing. There was huge demand for these EPCs at this price point. So lowering the price point would actually get more people to cook with electricity. And just to put this in perspective, the households in this study are using an extra over 100 units each year cooking with electricity with their EPC. That's 85,000 shillings that they're spending on electricity that they would probably otherwise be spending on charcoal and gas. So these subsidies, whether they come in through a tax exemption or through a private RBF program or through climate finance, they're a way to, that money will eventually go back into the electricity sector because it means more people are spending. And this statistic here comes from our midline survey. 75% of our participants intend to buy a second EPC. So lowering that cost means not only more people are buying it, but people are potentially buying multiple appliances, and that's driving electricity demand even further. And I will bring this to a close right now, but just briefly show you, this project, electric cooking in general, there's huge impacts on a variety of different SDGs. So we found households cooking with charcoal were spending 80 hours cooking with charcoal. Those same households are now cooking 20 hours per month or so with their EPC. So this is going to reduce the fuel that's being used for charcoal. It's going to increase households' electricity demand. Instead of using polluting fuels, they're instead using clean electricity. We see a lot of other stats here around health. So 15% of the households in our study were cooking with charcoal indoors. Now they're cooking with electricity indoors. We talked about gender before. We talked about the technicians that were trained on this project, CO2 emissions, charcoal usage, and I just want to highlight this last one as we bring it to a close here, the partnerships. So this project I felt was really unique in the collaborations that happened, seeing all these different partners from different, playing different roles, but working together to make this possible. And I want to thank all the partners who were involved in this, from our funders, GEAPP to Umeme and all the others as well, and particularly the Ugandan government, because this project is only possible because there's this enabling environment that's set up here to support electric cooking. And there's really ambitious targets, and we've been seeing that there's also a huge level of support that's followed on to that. So thank you to everyone that was involved, and thank you for listening and for your time.
Thanks very much, Elliot. That was brilliant. I think we can all agree that was an amazing presentation, really insightful, and yeah, it's not often you get to see such an in-depth presentation with those kind of data insights. So thanks very much. Before we move on to questions, we're going to have some brief remarks from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. So could I please invite Engineer Herbert Abigaba and Justina Kumu to provide some reflections. Thanks very much.
Hello, Will. I hope you can hear me.
We can. Thanks, Herbert.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, particularly the presenters and you, Will, for facilitating this conversation this afternoon. A very good morning or good afternoon to all those who have joined this discussion. I agree with you, very insightful presentation. I think Elliot has delivered the same way he did just at the recently concluded Renewable Energy Conference, where I do recall we discussed, promoted the idea around having this webinar. So I want to thank that we have indeed seen this materialize, particularly within time from the last conversation. And I do recall, Will, I think there was a lot of interest that was generated when we received this presentation during REC. And I do recall this was the genesis of this webinar. I still think this is a very insightful presentation. So thank you very much to all the partners, MECS, Umeme, ERA, Access to Energy for Impact. Elliot, you've been at this for a while. Thank you very much. And obviously, everyone on the call for your broader commitment really to promoting eCooking in Uganda as an alternative that we are looking at, particularly as government. Also in a special way to thank all the other upstream partners, particularly the UK government that continues to support this work, especially around eCooking, but also as we have learned, GEAPP that is collaborating with A2EI for this work, this very transformative work. Now, just to highlight, and some of us, I think majority of us know that government has committed to really scale electric cooking. Today, we're talking about access of 1.5% of eCooking. We have targeted under the NDP4, the National Development Plan for period 25-30, to increase that to about 18-19%. And obviously, one of the integrated options we're looking at is electric cooking in that regard. And so I just wanted to appreciate really that as we talk about those targets that we have set ourselves as a country, we reflect on the fundamental role that a presentation of this evidence, the purpose of this evidence, data and information, but also awareness. I think throughout the two presentations, we had a lot of awareness creation, having this primary data that then facilitates behavior change, change of perceptions, but more importantly for us, for the other actors on the government side and the other people that support the government in delivering this access, to have these tools and elements or opportunities for making decisions. And I like the proposals that come out of Elliot's presentation. I think that is really the purpose, so that we go away to further interrogate those on the basis of fitting those within the government broad framework and ensuring that we adopt them. And I did note, I think someone was, it was Patrick. Patrick was talking about the strategies or the purpose, being intentional really to scale up the lessons that we've picked here. And they already see an opportunity really to upscale these because they are very informative. They are grounded in evidence. So that helps really to drive. But also I did note that already this particular project was tied with a number of spillover activities, particularly around capacity building, that we've been able to train some technicians that will support the repair and maintenance of these appliances. In the same regard, I think I'm happy to note, and again, working with our colleagues, MECS and CREEC, we shall be rolling out a nationwide training program for electric cooking appliances. That is already under implementation. We'll be targeting almost 600 additional technicians to add to this cohort. And I do recall in my last conversation with CREEC and the other actors, I inquired that we make sure that we keep a database of these technicians, make sure that they are geo-referenced. But importantly, under the 600 that we are talking about, we want to ensure that those are embedded within the community so that this e-cooking is no longer something people hear about, but they live with, they appreciate. So if your next technician who handles your flat iron or your phone is able to also sort you out on your EPC, then there's that level of, I think, community or at least household ownership, and not feeling that this technology is alien or something that has been thrown out of the other spaces that it comes from. So the training is very important, but the other spillover effects I did note was obviously this unlocking of more private capital. We did note that Umeme was able to leverage this particular project to do a second order of these EPCs. And I think for me, that is the purpose really of some of these interventions, unless and until we scale them and leverage them and make sure that they are complementary and have this spillover effect, then they defeat the purpose for which they are designed. And so from the policy angle, we are very intentional that we want to improve this complementarity within the interventions that we are delivering. The third, obviously, that is more obvious, is around supporting the enabling environment. I think that is an important spillover, and I'm happy, really, Elliot, for bringing out. I think I missed them during the last presentation, but I'm happy that it's not just the questions, but you leave around proposals. I also did note, I think when I was checking the charts, there's a question on whether what we are doing for the other customers below the lifeline, and I think some of the answers Elliot brings through his proposals and recommendations, but also to note that as we transition from Umeme potentially to UEDCL, the ministry and UEDCL together with other partners has previously done a study, a somewhat similar study that was looking at the other customers, the lifeline customers. So we looked at the customer base of UEDCL. Obviously, there's a small number compared to the numbers we have with Umeme. 50%, about 50% of the customers for UEDCL are actually lifeline customers. So we have a lot of evidence also on the consumption behaviors within that cluster of households. And I see a lot of synergies that we are going to pick out of this study and obviously inform the scaling and additionality of these efforts. The other aspects I wanted to reflect on, Will, was that some of us might be aware, but I can use the opportunity to also inform our stakeholders on the whole that the ministry is finalizing the establishment of a clean cooking unit to really improve this coordination. I did note from both the presentations, we're emphasizing the role of partnerships and collaboration. And I entirely agree there's no better way to deliver these access targets, which I think are very easy, especially if we leverage these partnerships, the collaborative power of really sorting some of these challenges, away from this duplication where we are doing different things in different corners, to a more coordinated and more effective, I guess, approach. So within the clean cooking unit, one of the core roles will be to consolidate data. So we intend to consolidate data, but also try to achieve this harmonized reporting. So a report like this should be available to the key actors who are able to utilize it for the purpose it is intended. So that consolidation is important so that we have a one-stop center in the country where the different actors are able to pick this information. So I see really from the eCooking, and I want to salute our partner MECS and CREEC and all the others, Umeme, who has been behind this whole eCooking story, the regulator. That I think for eCooking, we're starting from, we already have a head start, particularly when I look at a rich pilot or study like this. I think we are starting from a head start in terms of really populating and constructing that our information management system at the Clean Cooking Unit. So I'm very happy and glad that we're working towards that common goal. But broadly, I think, and this is a point we have reflected on, is the potential of this technology or eCooking in really, supporting the broader government goal for accessing, for improving or expanding energy access. You will note that government right now has a very ambitious target to expand electricity access. But the question that often you find, you will note, for instance, from our rural electrification program, there's normally a question around the viability of some of those infrastructure development projects. And so you realize that the technology like this, I think, goes a long way in really supporting this expansion. But beyond that, that we have evidence and data to inform the planning of those programs, I think will go a long way in improving the viability as we design to achieve universal access. We are talking about moving from 25% today for grid connection to about 80% in the medium term. So that target, I think this is one particular intervention that will go a long way in supporting us in that regard. Lastly, might be to also remember that we had customers or the participants who participated in the pilot. And I think I really want to emphasize that these are very, very important. Because if you think in terms of strategy, I think we already have a convinced block of customers who, if we continue equipping with the right information and knowledge, might then become important. I think I did note from Elliot's submission that many of these are already asking for the second EPC. But beyond that, I think these same people are able to influence within their network, their family and friends, to also adopt this technology. So I will note, I had noted here a question for Ms. Susan, Sarah, that we wanted to get more information around, especially the change agents. She did note, I noted from her presentation that we now have change agents or champions. I'm very happy to be part of that network of those change agents so that we do not lose them. But if anything, we add to that number, because I think that's very important in terms of additionality and improving, not losing or ensuring that we are sustainably or sustaining some of these efforts. So really, I think I will leave it there. I have a few comments, maybe I'll come back. But I want to emphasize and thank all the partners once again, led by you, Max, Will, and Luis, and all the other colleagues on the call. And I remain very optimistic that really we shall solve this issue of clean cooking in Uganda. For us in government, we have already resolved, and I get empowered every day when I look at some of these efforts that are coming through the different partners towards this common goal. So thank you very much, Will.
Thanks very much, Herbert. Great to have your input. And yeah, look, thanks for addressing some of the things that are coming up in the chat, and obviously for your hard work and the ministry's really hard and continued work on eCooking and promoting eCooking. And thanks very much to Peter Mwesiger as well for answering a lot of these questions that are coming up in the chat. And thanks for all your questions. So we've got about 20 minutes now. So we're going to address as many questions as we can. Sorry if we don't get to them all, but also invite people to submit more questions. So I'm going to start by handing back to Elliot and asking maybe a little bit more. I think there was a question on the financial viability of an eCooking tariff. I think one of the really interesting things in Elliot's presentation was about how a potentially shifted tariff could actually be cheaper to implement. So maybe just going to Elliot and asking you to speak a little bit more to that. There are also a couple of questions about carbon credits, and also carbon emission reductions. So Elliot, over to you to speak to those things and to anything else that you'd like to address.
Thanks, Will. Let me share my screen here again. Yeah, so I did mention that we think that this change to the tariff can be cost effective and actually reduce the costs of this policy that's there. I think there was a question in the chat around, is the cooking tariff as it is, loss making for the utility? What does it mean for the revenue? I'm not in the position to answer that, but in looking at this subset of users that we had and comparing if these users had been on this structure here that we're proposing, what would it cost? And rather, what is it costing right now under the existing structure? We found it would reduce the cost. But this is a subset of users. We need to look across the whole country, and in order to really make a more thorough analysis of that. And I would say this is a preliminary suggestion that we don't expect to be taken up on, without that follow-on due diligence and without really looking at this, because there are potential cost implications there. But as I said, essentially what we're doing is flattening this curve. I said before at a presentation at REC, I live in Kampala. My household, if we were here on this graph, we would be here on the right side where we get the 70 units discounted each month. But instead, what if that was being spread out where 4 other households were getting 15 units or something like that? There's also ways that we can play around with these parameters here. Instead of having the cooking tariff be half price electricity, what if it was a 75% price there? So those are ways to play around with these variables. Maybe instead of 15 units, it's just 10 units each month. But you can play around with these to come up with something different. And the reason why we're interested in this idea, again, we saw that having the cooking tariff didn't mean people were cooking more, but knowing about the cooking tariff meant people had a different perception of cooking with electricity. So if it's here, everyone feels it a little bit, everyone's talking about it, and maybe more people will start to buy these appliances. There was a question about emission reductions. So we aren't claiming any carbon credits under this project. There's nothing set up for that, but we do have all the data to measure the CO2 emission reductions. And what we've done is we've implemented this dashboard here that follows and maps out, here's the gold standard metered and measured methodology, here's all the variables under it. Here are these variables that come in on this project. So with this, we're able to actually look at these. How is it that we measured these things? And we follow through that process and demonstrate step by step how this methodology is being implemented to come up with a CO2 emission reductions per year. And so one of the outputs that you should expect looking at this and coming out in the next couple months is a lot more publications and a lot more of these tools being made available to project developers and the public. So what our goal here is if you have metered electric cooking appliances, you'll be able to use these resources and really easily connect your data to this platform and come up with that calculation of what are the CO2 emission reductions, what are the carbon credits that are actually being generated. And the benefit here of this and within this platform is we're able to share data. So as a project developer, you could have this and it could be internal, but you could also choose to share it with your investor, or you could choose to share this with with the ministry or with another key partner that you have, that you give them some visibility into what is this project actually delivering. Let me stop there.
Thanks very much, Elias. That's great. Okay, so I think, yeah, still got questions coming in on the chat. We've got a question from Sumaya. Thanks, Umeme. We've got a question about is there a scale model that's been developed, and how to make that model work. I wonder if we could hear briefly from Peter Mwesiga. Peter, if you're still here, if you'd just like to speak to, I know there's an incoming order of EPCs 2,750, and that the model has been repeated in that sense. Peter, would you like to give a few thoughts? Oh yeah, great. Can you hear me, Peter? We can always come back to you if that's a bit of an issue right now. I wondered if we would just, I think there are some questions that were sort of relevant for the regulator. So I wonder if I could invite Patrick Tembe to come back in with a few remarks. I suppose any reflections that you have, Patrick, based on the questions around the tariff and so on, and also, how does ERA plan to continue to support eCooking, continuous promotion of eCooking in Uganda? Are you there, Patrick? Maybe we're having a couple of issues with Teams, which is not uncommon, so no problem. Yeah, I think, how about if there are any further questions, we could have some live questions asked. So does anyone want to put their hand up and come in with, if you want to raise your hand and come in with a live question, that would be great. Anything that we haven't quite got round to yet. Stuart, would you like to come in?
Thanks. Stuart from Village Infrastructure here. We've been doing a bit of solar electric cooking for quite some time. I was wondering what percentage of the baseline cooking fuel was actually displaced by the electric cooking, because typically projects I've seen so far only displace about 10 to 50% of the baseline cooking fuel, whereas obviously we're targeting more like 80 to 100%. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks very much. Elliot, would you like to come in and speak to
that? Yeah, I can, and thanks, Stuart, for your question. We've only done the preliminary analysis of this so far, so I can't say conclusively at this stage, but 10 to 50% seems about right. I think our perspective on this is a single appliance. We wouldn't necessarily expect it to fully displace all the other cooking that's happening. And we do see those limitations within the appliance. You can only cook one thing at once. So as an entryway into eCooking, we think this is exciting, but we wouldn't expect, and I don't think the data supports that it would fully displace all the other cooking fuels that are being used. So we hope in the future, the idea is, how do you get more appliances into the household? How do you start to introduce different types of appliances that people can use, and more training on how to actually use these effectively?
Thanks very much, Elliot. Yeah, I think that's a really good point on the importance of after sales support in maximizing usage. But I think, as we saw, there was consistent usage during this project. I think, Herbert, your hand went up. And Elliot. Yeah.
Yes, Will. I just wanted to supplement some, I think, 2 comments. One is speaking of, I think, the comments you picked from Sumaya, a very important point around the models to scale this. And I think in one of the points that Elliot made in his presentation was also the same, I guess, request out there that we look at ways of scaling this. And I see a broad opportunity of really working around this. The question that Stuart asked around how much of the other technologies were displacing, I think beyond this, I guess what I'll call the first phase of study, it will be interesting to see, maybe we'll begin plugging in these other elements, for instance, households that adopt the second or the third appliance, how much impact do we see on that? And those that maybe have, obviously in these same households we didn't pick, maybe the other alternatives around the other clean technologies that are being used. So I see, and I'm happy to really pick up this conversation with Elliot and MECS to see how do we grow this model to test it through all the other different elements that it's able to deliver. And also maybe my question, as I still have the microphone, is to Elliot, the possibility of how we can integrate some of these interventions. You know, you are aware, Will, that under one of our projects we want to deploy, say, 10,000 EPCs. We have other programs in government where we're in the short term, we want to deploy maybe 200,000 EPCs. So maybe my interest, and we don't have to answer this, I'm leaving it out so that we do not forget to have a discussion, is how we bring in more numbers into this model so that we improve it and test it better. Thank you.
Let me respond to that, and thank you, Herbert, for the comment. You know, we're definitely interested to talk more about how to operationalize some of these findings, how to gather more data that continues, you know, to continuously inform the growth of this sector. The platform that I shared today, for this project, we developed a lot of tools that focused on the analysis of a small project, a small number of units. But this work also ties in with our other data platform, Prospect, which we're using to support RBF programs. And that's really looking at scaling appliances. So Prospect is actually being used here in Uganda for this UECCC RBF that has you know, components around clean cooking. So you know, a lot of companies here are beginning to connect to those platforms, and it's possible that those data, you know, the data becomes a lot more accessible in the future and a lot more useful. Just to add one other point to the conversation around, you know, fuel displacement, one thing that we heard anecdotally from a lot of households was, I use this appliance, but no one else in the households knows how to use it. Even though there's other people that are doing cooking during the week, I'm the only one that uses the appliance right now, and I'm only home on the weekends. So even within this population and within these households here, I think there's room to grow that 9 units per month. And it comes from, you know, increased awareness, increased training, and yeah, just with time, I think, as well.
Thanks very much, Elliot. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and the program that the ministry, together with MECS, is the eCooking Scale program, is really looking to do that, to address all aspects of the jigsaw. You know, awareness, enabling environment, and yeah, therefore to get more people using e-cookers and more often. A hand went up. I think it was Ben Adongo. Would you like to come in, Ben?
Yes, thank you, Will. Thank you, Elliot, for that presentation. My question goes to you, Elliot. I just wanted to understand if you have like any learnings regarding the awareness of the cost of cooking, the real-time awareness. So basically whether customers or end users changed their behavior because they were aware of how much it was costing them to cook on electricity. And for background, this is simply because, you know, there's a tendency for people to think that it's very expensive to cook with electricity. So just want to see if there's any learnings from the study regarding the awareness, you know, having an influence on anything to do with their behaviors. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And this gives me a chance to talk about one of the experiments that we ran. So we had a small experiment that was run where we had half of the households. We were sending them text messages every 2 weeks. Here's how much electricity you used. Here's how much that's estimated to have cost you to cook with your EPC. We found no difference between the households that were receiving those messages and the households that weren't. And you know, we can point to maybe there's some complications there. One would be maybe 2 weeks isn't enough. Maybe that's too long, and people need quicker sort of responses to understand how they're using their appliances. Two, as I said before, it's already more cost effective to cook with the EPC, and just by virtue of using it more, people might have picked up on that and already sort of changed their behavior, where this extra information wasn't making a difference, or rather, if someone was already motivated to save money, they already wanted to be using this appliance anyway. So we didn't find anything here, but that's not to say that if done differently, it can't work, or it's not an important tool.
Thanks, Elliot. That's great. I think there was a hand that went up. Joseph, would you like to come in?
Yes. Yeah, this is Joseph from Solageo. So we had supplied the EPCs. So I just wanted to comment on two things. So the comments have been made about the cooking pot, that there was just one supplied. So I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. One, having an extra cooking pot wouldn't necessarily allow you to cook more 2 dishes or 3 dishes at a time, because you still have to use that one pot with the EPC. But apparently the feedback was that people didn't want to, if they cooked 1 dish, then they wanted to sort of keep that dish in the pot and then use a second pot to cook another dish, and and after they've cooked that, to keep that dish in the second pot. So so it doesn't necessarily reduce cooking multiple dishes. The other issue with the pots, if you think about it, the pots are almost the same size as the EPC. So there are 2 things. For sure, there's demand for additional pots. So the question is, the pots are also being shipped to Uganda. So there are 2 things. Can those pots be manufactured locally, which would probably help? The second thing is, can there be some incentive set up so that so for example, if you're talking about the electricity subsidies or whatever, whereby usage of electricity earns you credits, which then allows you to use those credits to acquire an extra cooking pot. So it's just a matter of being, I guess, a bit more creative and seeing how it could be possible to provide access to additional cooking pots. There is definitely demand for additional cooking pots. So just a couple of things there. The second thing, in terms of scaling e-cooking, so in terms of the financial support, it's been around the e-cooking tariff and things like that. So if you're going to expand access to the e-cooking to populations beyond higher income urban households, then you have to look at additional ways of financing this, and this could so this would mean bringing in other beyond just the utility company, other finance partners, including domestic ones, all the way to the microfinance level, right? So that's the other thing, that if you're looking to scale, you have to look at also scaling sources of finance. So those are just the 2 things I would like to comment about.
Thanks very much, Joe. I didn't realize it was you, and it's brilliant to have you here and to have your inputs. And thanks for so much hard work on this project. It's been a big part of its success. Thanks very much. Yeah, so we're very nearly at time. I saw John Leary's hand go up, so we're going to hear from John, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So over to you, John.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? It's raining very heavily here.
You're a bit muffled, but give it a go.
Okay. So yeah, a big thank you for organising the webinar today. This is the third time I've seen the presentation from Elliot and enjoyed it just as much as the first time. Question picking up on some of the issues on the chat raised about induction stoves. Would the recommendations that were made be different if we were focusing on induction rather than EPCs as an appliance that I imagine is probably more expensive to use than other cooking fuels in Uganda right now, if the price trends are similar to how they are in Kenya. So just to repeat, because of the muffling and rain, would the recommendations be different for induction rather than EPCs?
Are you talking about Elliot's recommendations in the presentation, John?
Exactly.
Yeah. Elliot, would you like to come in?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting question. I think a lot of our recommendations broadly, they're still the same. I think expanding that cooking tariff to apply to more people, that people are talking about it, and it's an awareness raising tool. I think there's still validity to that. I think the token rebates, or when you buy the appliance, you get a reward for it that subsidizes or makes your cooking free for a time. I think there's still validity to that, and the upfront costs. I think looking at ways to bring that down and make the appliances more affordable to more people, there's still validity in that. I think that though a lot of these sort of conclusions or some of the things that we're finding would change. So I think the CCT data that's come out of Kenya recently says EPCs are the cheapest way to cook because they're so energy efficient, and induction stoves were the most expensive way to cook. So in that sense, if your goal is to have people cook more with electricity, then these tariff structures or these incentives that bring down that cost of cooking become more important. And I think with the EPC, because it's so energy efficient, again, what tariff you're on doesn't really seem to matter. But for induction stoves, I think people will become much more price sensitive. At the same time, with induction stoves, they're more versatile. They use more energy. So, that increase at a household level, the percentage that household's electricity consumption could go up, stands to be much bigger. So it's an opportunity in that way. But yeah, all that to say, I think the proposals there similar, but there are some different sort of perspectives once induction gets into the picture.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much, Elliot. I would agree. Of course, it's all eCooking. So, and the goal of an eCooking stack is a great thing to aim towards. Okay, Herbert, you put your hand up. You can have the last word.
No, just in half a minute, Will, I wanted to request that if possible, we collect all the comments. I saw some of them are good points or recommendations. If we could pick those and probably have an opportunity to look at them off the call, it would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. I'll make sure to do that. Thanks, Herbert. So we're at time. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Special thanks to all of our speakers, to Patrick, Sarah, Elliot, Herbert, and all our questioners. It's been really insightful. And yeah, I'll be sure to follow up on the learnings from this webinar. And yeah, thanks very much to all the supporters of the project. It's great to have Peter Moisiger in the comments answering. Peter has been the absolute champion of this project. So thanks very much, Peter. So we'll close it there. Thanks very much for attending, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.